All right, everyone, welcome. We'll just give it about a few more seconds for all the participants to start flooding in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'll get started, and then people will probably still keep coming in, and that's totally fine. So welcome to the Mental Health and the Holidays webinar. We have an amazing panel. So excited to have this webinar right now. Just going to give a quick kind of tech reminder. This webinar is going to be recorded. It will be on our Open for Good site probably later today or tomorrow. So check back there if you have to miss anything. We'll save questions for the end. So as time allows, we're hoping to save about 5-10 minutes at the end. But please write any of the questions you have in the chat function, and I'll hopefully get to those if possible. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please just also use that chat function, and I can try and troubleshoot it for you. So would love to just do a quick introduction and background for all of our amazing panelists. So to start, we have Ariel Coplan, who is the co-founder of Not 9 to 5 organization and executive chef for District 461. From a young age, Ariel Coplan has had a love affair with the food and beverage industry. He has always known he wanted to be a chef, and early in his career, Ariel worked around the world in renowned restaurants. He was determined to create change and began to have thoughtful discussions focused around mental health with his old friend, Hassel Aviles. Together, they launched Not 9 to 5 in 2018. Ariel is currently the executive chef for District 461, a multi-venue company aimed at cultivating forward thinking in the food and beverage industry. So Hassel Aviles is also the co-founder of Not 9 to 5, and with over 15 years of experience in marketing and leadership in the hospitality industry, Hassel has grown a fiery passion for restaurants, events, and entrepreneurship. From there, she created the Toronto Underground Market, a large-scale culinary festival designed as an incubator for food entrepreneurs, chefs, and home cooks in 2011. These days, Hassel's passion for the food and beverage industry is seen through her work as the co-founder of Not 9 to 5, as I mentioned. And this is a nonprofit organization that empowers hospitality, food, and beverage service workers by mobilizing support for mental health and substance use. So thank you both for joining from Not 9 to 5. To continue on, we have Hardette Harris, who is a private chef and owner of Pure Louisiana Soul. She has worked in Houston, San Antonio, and now back in her native Louisiana. In 2015, Chef Hardette was proud to announce her history-making creation of North Louisiana's official meal. She hopes to jumpstart an eternal love affair between North Louisiana dishes and the rest of the world. Chef Harris was recently named Louisiana Life Magazine 2017 Louisianian of the Year, one of Country Road Magazine's 2017 Best Small Town Chefs, and many more accolades. And so additionally, she is excited to announce that in late August of 2019, she opened the Us Up North Kitchen in Louisiana, where she serves dishes that celebrate the uniqueness of Northern Louisiana cuisine. Next up is Kris Hall. Kris has worked in hospitality for over 10 years across multiple sectors of this industry. Having experienced his own mental health issues in the past, he was compelled to create a conversation to challenge the stigma associated with mental health issues within hospitality. The Burnt Chef Project was born to challenge mental health stigma through branded apparel, with profits used to raise awareness and provide training to the world's 72 million hospitality workers, one person at a time. Last but not least, Billy Alexander also is joining us. Billy is a Canadian Indigenous-born executive chef and culinary advisor for Caldwell First Nation, located in Leamington, Southern Ontario. As world-renowned Cordon Bleu trained chef, his accomplishments include, but are not limited to, founding chair of Indigenous Culinary of Associated Nations and culinary development chef for WestJet. His Mohawk mother and Indigenous communities raised him to be proud of his Indigenous culture. He grew up with food being synonymous with community and learned to cook with ingredients he foraged and hunted. Through food and social advocacy and lived example, Billy practices a look-forward philosophy and encourages everyone to have difficult conversations, broaden one's inner circles to include those who don't mirror themselves, and above all, eat well together. So that was my quick bio for everyone, but thank you so much for joining us, and I will let Hassel and Ariel take it from here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to have such wonderful guests today to cover such a important topic. I mean, I feel like every year, you know, through the holiday seasons is a very, very difficult time, but this year especially, you know, there's so much going on, you know, between all of us feeling a lot of feelings about, you know, the closures and around what's happening with the pandemic and where our cities are. I mean, it's interesting because we have such a diverse group of people from different cities, and I think that, you know, we all have such you know, strong opinions around where we're at right now. So thank you to our guests. And again, I'm Ariel Coplan. I'm one of the co-founders of Not 9 to 5.
I'm really, I just wanted to update everyone that unfortunately, because of technical difficulties, we can't see Hardette, but she is here. So the video is having some issues, but we do have audio from Hardette. So some housekeeping, if you could, you know, just throw your questions into the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. You know, as Ariel said, this is such a difficult time in the holidays on a regular year for some people, but I think for this year, it's difficult for everyone. All of the change, you know, that we've experienced in so many different types of losses. You know, I did want to give a content warning for anyone that there could be heavy subject matter discussed, including mental health challenges, depression, suicide, complex feelings. If, of course, you need to leave the discussion, we encourage that, or take some deep breaths, walk away and come back. The most important thing is that you take care of yourself, and we will get right into it. So, you know, mental health is impacted by everything in our lives. And the holidays is obviously a very intense time, even if it's not a difficult time for you. There's lots of, you know, stimulation and a lot of emotions that come up. There's also a lot of grief and pressure. So in this year, when we're having so many feelings of change and uncertainty, and it affects all of us in each such different ways, I really want to hear from each panelist. You know, for some of us, we're in lockdown. Other times, we're just living in a very different reality. But can each of you share with us why speaking about mental health and the holidays is important to you in 2020? And Hardette, I'm going to ask you to go first, then Billy, then Kris, and Ariel, you can close this out.
Thank you, Hassel. 2020 has been a huge, whatever, fill in the blank. It's been a lot for all of us. And for me, I just opened my kitchen us up north in August of 2019. So with opening opening a restaurant, an eatery, kitchen, whatever, is a huge undertaking as it is. And you look at that first year as your test year, you know, to see what are you going to tweak? How is it going to run? Am I doing this right? And so late in the year and then early into 2020, and you know, everything started just happening this year. So I think with a unique small business like I have, a small kitchen, I think it's important because small business owners, chefs, caterers like me have their own unique set of stressors. And so I just want the people that are listening that say, you know, this isn't a place for me. These are huge James Beard, you know, associated restaurants, and this isn't for me. They're not going to think I have any problems. So, and here we find ourselves during the holidays, trying to just kind of see what the holidays will bring. And so that brings a lot of stress, especially to the small people that are trying to stay afloat. So I'm so happy to be here to kind of represent that unique corner of the room that are really trying to just kind of, you know, it's still food you have to put out. It's still pleasing the customer. And all chefs, all cooks, no matter where you are, knows that is the stress. That is the, you know, getting the ingredients, making it work, you know, promising with the menu and delivering. And so I'm really hoping that 2021 can kind of, you know, work out and keep me afloat.
Thanks, Hardette.
Thank you.
Billy?
Yeah, so It's a pleasure to be here. I think this is an incredibly important topic to talk about, specifically this year, just because, you know, when we think about culinary and we think about these times normally, and we think about hospitality in the industry in general for this time of year and holidays, it's usually go, 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 go. And you're often dealing, the hospitality industry has this ability to create a family for people that I know when I got into this culinary industry, like my family was kind of a little bit all over the place, and that culinary really replaced that world for me, and it became my family. And before I knew it, I was addicted to the stresses, and I actually became really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I always took pride in that in this industry, and thinking about that if I took a person who was not from hospitality and asked them to do what we put up with regularly, the success rate wouldn't be overly high. And yet this year, particularly in culinary, you're usually working on holidays and you're not with your family, and you're often working the dates when somebody else has to, when they get to celebrate. So what I'm most uncomfortable with, and what I'm seeing a lot of people in the industry this year is we don't, for a lot of cases, there's not that restaurant family. There's not people together. And suddenly the most uncomfortable thing is that in 2020, you actually have time to celebrate, but there's not much to celebrate. And you're uncomfortable with the extra time that you have in your life, and you're uncomfortable with not being at work, and you're uncomfortable with not doing hundreds of orders, and you don't know what to do with yourself. And as a result of this, it's leading to a lot of like introspective views of people on themselves, on what they are and how they feel, and it's scary. And the interesting thing for me is I had like a really solid career, and I was in Alberta, and I, you know, came off the best year and many awards and many accolades, and COVID affected me. I ended up losing my job. I ended up having to move across the country to Ontario, and I had brief moments of really scary where it was like, is this industry ever going to recover, and what does it mean for us? And I had this like self-identifying where I'm like, wait, where does Billy the person start and end, and where it does the chef part of me start and end? And it's been a scary reflective year for this, because it made me think about something more. It made me think that, and not once in my career have I ever been asked like how my mental health was, or have I ever thought about it. In fact, it's only ever been about, am I strong enough to survive? This is what you do to make it in this industry, without ever thinking about the toll that it takes. And now, not being able to do it, I'm thinking about the toll that it's taken. And the last thing I want to say in regards to this subject is like, mental health is not about weakness. It's about necessity and survival. And in order to have the tools that you need to succeed, we need to have what's available for mental health in order for us to even start to do the job, let alone to get back to doing it when this whole ordeal is over.
I love that. Thank you, Billy. Kris, your turn.
I think, I mean, Billy, you summarized some fantastic points I totally agree with. I think, you know, not being a chef myself, but representing, you know, thousands of chefs and hospitality professionals, one thing that we're seeing this year is the shift, as you say, from going from a busy and quite often toxic environment where it's fast-paced with, you know, limited access to free time and to, you know, opportunities to work out and spend time with your family, to be thrust into a position where initially it seems like quite a nice thing, you know, although the knee-jerk reaction and going from 100 miles an hour to 0 miles per hour was a shock to the system, and it left people, including myself, in quite a dark hole. You know, that soon wears off and you become a little bit more content, and then we get, certainly over here in the UK, we've been flashed back to work for a brief period of time where the government then funds a help out, eat out scheme, and then they lock us all down again, and there's this constant toing and froing and coming back and forth, and it's left people feeling jarred now. You know, those that have been in some of the more restrictive areas, initially, again, we're like, right, we know what to expect this time round, and it's, you know, we're more prepared for this. But then 3 or 4 weeks on, they're like, nothing's happening. I'm doing nothing. You know, I can't get excited about Christmas because there's no finances coming in. I'm not doing anything at home. I'm not flexing my creative or culinary abilities. And a whole new challenge is promoting itself. And those who might have been struggling with the work environment to begin with are now finding that they're struggling with a completely different environment altogether. And it's like that as an identity crisis suddenly arises. Then, like, where do I belong? Do I belong in a busy environment where I have my family around me or my work family, and I've got tasks and I'm enjoying the buzz of the environment? Or do I belong at home with my family doing something completely different? Or is there something in between that I just haven't found yet? And it's this purgatory feeling. And that's why I think at this moment in time, it's important to talk about it. It's great to be on a world stage as well and talking across country, you know, different countries. We've all experiencing the same thing for the first time in bloody ages. We're unified with the same thing that's afflicting every same person in different varying degrees, but we're all experiencing the same shared emotions and the highs and the lows of this. And I think it's really important, and it's a great format. So thank you for hosting this.
Thanks, Kris. You know, I totally agree. I mean, this year has been so exhausting. I mean, I think to your point, you know, I think everywhere in the world that I've heard of, there's been a lot of back and forth, and there's been a lot of, you know, coming and going and opening and closing, and, you know, do this, but don't do that. And then a week later, they've changed their minds, and it's just taxing. And, you know, I think for me personally, you know, I'm at a point now where I'm tired, and, you know, it's closing of the year, and you know, it's interesting to look back on this year. And you know, at the beginning of the year, I worked in a company, we had over 200 employees, and now we have 0. You know, so it's confusing as well, I think, for me, because I also am excited. I'm excited about next year. You know, I'm happy that the holiday season means a little bit of rest. Billy, as you kind of mentioned, you know, normally that's not the case. You know, but I think that there's a lot of really varying degrees of emotions that I'm feeling. And, you know, I'm definitely feeling a lot of grief. You know, I feel grief knowing that our industry has changed, and, you know, it doesn't matter. It will never go back to what it was. It has changed. It might not be for the better, it might not be for the worst. It's just going to be different. And I think all of that's left me feeling tired, to be completely honest. And I think it's important more than ever to talk about this and be honest and open about this, because you know, it's dangerous to continue to suppress these feelings. And Kris, to your point, like it's a world scale, like it's everybody that's feeling these things. It's not an isolated thing. So yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated answer, but I'm feeling everything right now.
Thanks, everyone. I so appreciate the honest, candid conversation. I think for so long we have been told to check our stuff at the door, you know, and not share and not feel emotions, which is absurd if you think about it, because that's really asking people not to be human. And in a year like this one, you know, where there's so much loss and grief. So I love some of the terms that everyone's been using, you know, because they're really important to highlight. And one of them is the grief. And although some of us have lost people, some of us have lost other things, and stability is one of those things. You know, our economy, healthcare, education, and government are all systems that we normally depend on to stay stable. And in this year, that has not been the case. And so it makes us lose our sense of predictability, control, and that leads to and this loss of identity that you've touched on, I think is so important to highlight, because when you lose that, then it starts to bring up other questions, and you start kind of feeling like you're spinning a bit, which is a terrifying experience to have. But I did want to just remind everyone that, you know, there's a lot of living losses as well happening. So that means things that are still ongoing, you know. So we have Canada, the US, and the UK on this panel, and you know, here in Canada and Ontario, at least Toronto, we are in our second lockdown as well. And we don't know when that's going to end. We have a date, but it may change and then we might go back. And there's all of these unknowns. And so just a reminder to anyone listening that anything you feel is valid. There's no right or wrong to emotional or mental experiences. Many of what we feel are natural reactions to these life events that we've all been describing. So on that note, I'm going to pass it off to Ariel to ask the next question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we briefly touched on it. This year has been extremely physically, mentally, and emotionally taxing and really demanding. You know, I'm really curious to know, you know, with the holiday season coming up, it's definitely hitting different this year. Can you share what you're experiencing? If you want to start, Hardette, I'd love to hear from you first.
Yeah, what I'm experiencing is trying, kind of like I said earlier, I'm trying to kind of finish the year with a plan for next year. And like you all said earlier, there's already stress there in this industry, and it's suppressed. And suppressing stress leads to depression, from what I understand and know. And so we don't have that luxury of saying, oh, the holidays are here, I'm going to rest, I'm going to relax, and just kind of take my holiday orders and move on to the new year. So I'm trying to figure out how to balance all of that, how to balance what has gone on with me this year. And like you said, the things that were already there, and just try to plan for the next year. Just try to stay strong, take my holiday orders, and just hope for the best. And hopefully, you know, hopefully 2021 will prevail and show us something different. But saying that to say, we still have to be mindful of taking care of ourselves. Just because I made it through the holidays and here's a new year, we can start fresh, doesn't mean that you're okay. And you still have to really take time for yourself, because these things can get serious and out of hand. And I'm, like you said, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. And I hope there are people that are listening in, you know, knowing that just because you're getting, you know, there's business still coming in and you're grinding every day, that does not mean that's normal to be able to sustain that. You know, at some point you've got to check on yourself. And I think, like Billy said, you don't even know that you broke down. You don't even know that, you know, you're thinking, well, this is what hard work is. And, you know, why would I discuss this with anybody? I'm working hard, and I don't want to seem like I'm a failure or I can't handle, you know, the business, especially with mine. It's small, it's just me. I don't want anybody to think you can't handle that little bit. Well, it's still a big deal as an individual running a business by themselves. So I just think it's important to make sure you don't, and I've done this, I've poured every single thing out of my cup, and I've taken, you know, everything off my plate to give to others, the business, you know, emotionally, financially, and you get to a point, there is nothing left. And it's hard to, you can't even explain it to anybody. You can't, you know, it's hard to explain that I didn't make that appearance, I didn't get that done because I don't have any fuel in the tank. And you know it, but you still try to do it. It's kind of like a car that doesn't have any oil or gas. You keep driving it, you're going to make it worse. So just kind of going back, just because we make it through the holidays and we have plans and it works, still take care of yourself. Just don't sit and say, "Whoo, I made it through 2020. I made it through the holidays. Everything's good." And if it is, that's good. But we can't ignore. You know, you can't put a cover over something and say it's out of sight, and so I'm good.
I love that. I think what I love more, though, Hardette, is that we can actually see you now.
Oh, I don't know what happened.
Your video came on.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm glad it did. I'm glad y'all can see me.
Yeah, the self check-ins are so important, and it's something that I think we don't take time to do.
Yeah.
Billy, you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, you know, this year's been interesting. I think I went through the better part of, you know, the last 23 years I've been an executive chef, and I went through the better part of this whole ordeal trying to remember the last time I had like fear or uncertainty in regards to my career. And there's been lots of mistakes and lots of failures over the years, but nothing that really like made me have complete like self-doubt. And the interesting thing about this from a perspective of hospitality is like it is ingrained in who you are after you've been doing this for a long time. And when the idea of that stops or that fear takes over, that you think it's not just a job anymore. And I found myself going like, wait, what would I do if I didn't have this, or who would I be, or how would I survive? And then that can get you in some like very dark spots. That can that leads to like self-worth and just really wondering what your purpose is. You know, I'm an Indigenous person. I specialize in Indigenous cuisine. And what I saw also in regards to me stopping doing what I was doing was I had concerns about if I could share my culture anymore. I saw all of these Indigenous businesses going out of business. They were seasonally approached. They never had this. And that was on the rise in Canada. And now I felt an added level of responsibility to continue doing what I was doing and furthering it so people didn't forget. And then I started to wonder, wait, if I stopped doing this, or how would I continue? And that really hit me on who I was as a personal level. And the interesting thing that I realized throughout, and I have to constantly remind myself, is that the worst feeling in the world is feeling like you're alone. And it took a national pandemic or a worldwide pandemic for us to realize that we were all going through it, and that we're actually the furthest thing from being alone, even though the recommendations by all health boards was to go be alone and keep yourself separate. But there's a difference between not being able to socially interact with people and being alone. And we have to talk about these things with each other, and we have to realize that we're not the only people going through this, and that strength comes from other people. And it's not what people think, where it's just a bunch of people talking about how bad their life is. But in fact, without those conversations happening, you often don't ever get to the point of realizing there's hope that your life can be anything different. And wearing those things that we battle on your chest as a shield and putting it out front, you may not realize it individually, but you being vulnerable is actually what makes other people strong. And I had to, as a person, as a leader who spent his whole time having to have the answers for other people, I had to become really comfortable with the things I couldn't control, and realizing that my strength would be viewed in many different ways, and it often admitted that I was being weak. And so it's been an interesting learning curve for me throughout this process. And I think if we can get through it, we can come back like stronger than we were prior to it. And this is what I'll leave everybody to think about this with. Think about the amount of breaks you got in your first or second shutdown, and think about when you did one little thing, you felt so tired. You weren't tired because of that one thing. You were tired because what you've asked your body to do for the last 20 years. You need a break.
I love that, Billy. I think there's so many great points there. You know, I think we always talk about vulnerability and the power of vulnerability and how it is contagious. And I think it's something that, you know, we need to normalize within our industry for sure, because, you know, oftentimes, like you mentioned, people have this thick skin and this we chef, and, you know, the chef can never be wrong because the chef is always right. And, you know, I think that that's such a harmful practice, and it really needs to be rethought. I mean, it's something that we actively need to start tearing down. Kris, I'm curious to know your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, so I've got two. Obviously, my personal perspective is, especially working in the field of mental health, this has flip-flopped me more times in a week than I can even possibly begin. I've never experienced such such range of highs and lows as I do on a weekly basis. You know, I've had depression in the past, I've had anxiety, I've had you know, crisis of identity that I've had to seek help for. But honestly, I mean, like this week, for example, the week started off on a high. You know, I was achieving a lot of photography shoots, which I also do. And then today, I've just thought that I'm a complete failure, and that nothing, you know, that I'm not achieving what I've set out to do, and that the task is too big for anyone to achieve. And I know that that's just what's going on at the moment in my head. That's not reality. That's just how I'm feeling. But you know, I guess I'm lucky to be able to perceive myself from a third person and understand what's going on in terms of emotional intelligence. But what really surprises me is that for me, I know that I'm perhaps, you know, maintaining as much in terms of mental hygiene as much as possible, in terms of physical hygiene as well. But there must be a lot more going on. You know, all of this additional pressure and insecurity to do with finances, and you know, we've been given a vaccine, but what's the actual effectiveness of it? And you know, there's reports coming out that there's, you know, people are allergic to it and all this sort of stuff, and you just, the enormity of the situation starts to pile on upon me. And that's me. I mean, moving from, and I think you Billy, you mentioned a really good point, and so did you, Hardette, about, you know, you touched upon burnout and how within hospitality and chefs specifically, you have a badge of honor, which is you don't complain, you just get on with it. And it's almost a case of like, actually, fuck it, I've done 80 hours, you've only done 60 hours. I'm the bigger, you know, bigger, excuse the term, but dick in his kitchen. Whereas it shouldn't be like that, because most of the people who are suffering from burnout are the ones who are driving themselves to a complete exhaustion. And often enough, and it's times like this now, as you say, Billy, where it sort of creeps up on you and you don't even know you've got it. You don't even know. And it's not until you sit there and you think, why haven't I got any energy? Why can't I be asked to do anything today? There's nothing. I don't have any drive. I don't have any passion. I feel emotionally blunted. And if you're not allowing yourself some time and space to process that, and you're being hard on yourself during this time in terms of saying, right, I need to keep pushing, I need to be doing this, I need to be taking up a new hobby, and I need to be like fulfilling all of this spare time. And when you go back into the kitchen, you're already, you know, down in a negative way. And you have to try and learn to recoup. And as you say, opening up these conversations, being vulnerable, I appreciate time is short, so I'll just say that the thing that's I've noticed a lot recently, and I know Hassel on our last chat this came up as well, but Brené Brown's empathy versus sympathy chat, I have never seen it be played so often at the moment. And I think what we are experiencing now is a mass learning of the term empathy and what it means. And this whole opening up and conversation now is actually getting people to start realizing that there is strength in vulnerability, and it's okay to, you know, to admit that you're only human.
I love that, Kris. Oh, all of your answers. I mean, Hardette, from talking about how you can't serve from an empty cup, that's such a powerful reminder that I think so many of us need. You can't really, you know, it's not, or you can, but you're not going to be doing as good of a job. So that self-care piece, love that. And yeah, Billy, vulnerability is contagious. And thank you for reminding us of the importance of that, you know, and for so often, I don't know, I find our industry, I was so molded and conditioned to service with a smile, no matter what I felt. And so it was this facade that I just wore all the time of like, everything's great, sunshine and rainbows, because that's what you had to do as a server, you know, or manager or host or bartender or whatever front of house job I was doing at the time. And vulnerability really breaks that down, because it means that I'm not doing that anymore. It means that I am saying, no, I'm diagnosed with depression, and today it's really flaring up, you know, and I'm not okay. And everything has a filter of like negative self-talk and all that kind of stuff. And Kris, you kind of touched on that, right? On talking about how the highs and lows, the one day I'm here and one day I'm there, and you know, I'm up, I'm down, I'm all over the place, and sometimes all within an hour. I agree with you. The roller coaster of this year is like getting beat up, you know, and we are in a way. And so that's another reminder too, is just like if you were physically injured, when you're mentally injured, you need to take care of that and recover from that. We need to stop this distinction between mental health and physical health and start understanding that our mind's actually in the body. It's interconnected. It's not like our mind's down the street in another, overseas. Like, it's literally in us. So, and on the last point that I want to just highlight that you mentioned, Kris, about the trying to provide space between who you are and the experience you're having. So if you feel low, that doesn't mean you're low. It just means your experience is you're feeling low. And that space is so powerful. So we touched on a few things now, but I did want to dive a little deeper for anyone. We're all in this collective grief. We're all in this collective experience, global pandemic. So how do you take care of yourself? How are we taking care of ourselves when we're all in this collectively experiencing this? And I'll let whoever wants to go first. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. For me, it's different. Like, I find that it's particularly hard around the holidays with it, because you look for things to celebrate. And I think we all have things in our life that are worth celebrating at some point. And it's about being, for me, in the right mental state. Like, I can't be in control of a lot of factors in my life, but I can be in control of my actions and the mental state that I'm in that. So what I mean by that is, I may not be able to control my mental state, but I can control what I do with that mental state. And a really good example of this is like drinking over the holidays. I do drink. I like to celebrate. I like to, I'm hospitality born and raised, and a lot of us have done those things. What I try never to do is I try not to do those things when I'm in a down state. I try to always make sure that I'm in the right mind frame. So what ends up happening for me a lot of the times is I plan those things. I plan dates to look forward to so that I know I'm in the right state with it. It's almost like being a kid at Christmas. I get excited about it, and I'm in a good state when I'm in that time frame, as opposed to life is the worst right now, I need a drink. And that helps me kind of control any of the, not all of the negative things. You're still a human being, but it helps me be in the right state going into it. A couple of the other things that I really do with it is try to get outside, get away from Zoom, get away from the computers, get some sunlight. It really is beneficial, getting your serotonin levels back up, and realizing that the world is not the four walls you've been asked to stay in. And last, for me personally, Indigenous wise on it, we've often believed food is our medicine. I really believe the food that I take into my body has a big effect on who I am as a person and how I interact with others. So I try to eat healthy as much as possible. And again, I plan my days where I'm just kind of going to go wild and eat whatever I want. And I spend a lot of the time in the gym, because I just find that, as you said, Hassel, that there's no differentiation between body and mind and spirit, and one is within the other. And when I physically feel stronger, I mentally tend to think stronger. So those are kind of my keys.
Nice. Do you mind if I jump in? I'm probably the worst to give advice because I don't take my own advice. So here we are in the field of mental health, dishing it out on a daily basis, saying, these are the key things in order to stave off any ill mental health and look after yourselves. And yet I'm probably exhibiting signs of early burnout by driving myself into the ground. So, if I was talking to someone, if I was giving myself advice, I would perhaps identify the fact that I'm not spending as much time outside as I need to. I take the dog for a walk every morning, but for me, a 20-minute, 30-minute walk isn't long enough. An hour's walk is where my lungs open up and I start to feel a little bit more alive and disconnected. And I think certainly my workload in terms of helping the community is significant enough, and that sometimes I just need to forget and leave my phone at home on these walks, because there's nothing worse than walking around in the British countryside, and you've got all of this stuff going on, and you get around the whole walk and then you realize you've not looked up once and you don't even know how you got round. you've managed to do some work, which is really, really positive, but actually you've not taken any time for self-care. I was gymming regularly, sort of 3 times a week, but due to workload, I've not been able to this week. And I think that's also the reason why we've hit Thursday. I don't know where the week's gone, and I'm feeling quite lethargic. I'm feeling tired. I don't feel great about myself. I want to feel that ache in my body, from the squats or from lifting weights or doing cardio. And I know that I feel happy and I feel more confident when I do that. So again, just to echo Billy, it's the getting outside, it is the physical exercise, the connecting with people as well, but not necessarily all the doom and gloom, and not necessarily about mental health. I think that sometimes just having a laugh with someone, chatting absolute nonsense, I think is a really, really good thing, because life is about releasing the brakes and releasing the expectations upon yourself to perform all the time. And that can be, whether that's standing on your head, whether that's dancing around the living room, whether that's, just talking absolute rubbish to a mate. I think those moments you need to provide to yourself to be able to feel human for a change. So this is good advice from someone who can't take it.
I can go now. I think I decided when I went into this part, my background is private chefing. When I went into this part of it, I promised myself I would get enough sleep, that I would try my best not to work all night and do those late night all-nighters and just get, no sleep. And so that's one of the things that somewhat helps. But the other thing is, especially during this pivot and finding what works for us, try not to pivot and create things that you in a burnout state aren't able to do. Don't put too much on yourself. And then when you are burned out or you are feeling the stress of the COVID numbers dropping and all that you're not doing too much that's going to take you down even more on top of all of that. So keep your expectations for yourself where you can actually handle them. I think that's really important, because that's works somewhat for me. And I have to remind myself sometimes. I'm just kind of like, Kris, I can tell you all day long the best things to do, and I'm right. I know I'm right, but I won't do them. And I know that that's not good, because you need to take your own advice, because it works. And the other thing is, try to separate what you need to do for yourself, especially in your work, as opposed to, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to be broke. What am I going to do? And I think Billy spoke to that earlier about you're so attached to what you do. I celebrate North Louisiana cuisine, and if I have to completely pull away from this and do something else and do a huge pivot, what does that look like? Who am I now? What am I going to do? And I can just say try to stay on course, but it is difficult. You just got to be mindful of what the toll it's taking on you when you're trying to overlook those types of stressors. And but I agree, getting outside, doing something, you got to go that extra mile during these times. You've got to really, really look out for yourself. There's a stigma of having just being stressed or depressed or just overwhelmed. That's normal stuff. But you can see it on somebody, but they won't talk about it, and they won't, of course, not admit it. But I think you need to find somebody to talk to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be therapy, but you can't just keep bobbing around like that it's not there, because it's not going away. It's going to eventually take a toll on you. So that's my advice, just to be my coping skills is just to be aware, keep it at the forefront, work on it as much as I can, and not ignore it. Because at this point, you've taken yourself too far as it is, and this is not the time to be just kind of walking on a tightrope, hoping it'll work out, because you will tumble if you don't keep it at the forefront.
I love that, Hardette. I think for me, generally speaking, the gym and being active is a really large part of my wellness routine. And with this lockdown, the gyms are closed. And actually, even before the lockdown, there was quite a few cases at the gyms. And so I made the decision just to not go to the gym. So, I mean, I definitely feel like being a little bit more adaptive to trying new things and searching for other elements of wellness within my life has been something very important. I think that during this time, I've been more active in, more regular therapy sessions. Like that's a big one. And I think, the other thing is being accepting of myself and understanding that, like, if I'm having a bad day or if I'm not in a good headspace, then it's just, it's where I'm at. And Hassel, I think you touched on it as well as Kris. It doesn't make it who I am. It's more about where I am and being able to kind of get through that, using different tools. I think the other thing that I just want to add is, like, the sun is just so much shorter these days, right? Like the sunlight that we have, and it's darker for us here. And, I think being aware how much that affects me is a big part, because it really does. And so, whether it's a matter of having a sunlight, like a fake sunlight or liquid sunshine, like having something that is able to help me through this.
I love that, Ariel. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, all of your coping tips that everyone has touched on, some of them I definitely use, like Billy, your rule around drinking or using substances at all when I'm not okay is something I've been practicing for a few years. So only drink if I'm happy, if I'm in a good place, if I'm not feeling huge flare up of depression. And it's really helped. It's made a huge difference. And around the holidays, for me, one of my biggest coping tips is boundaries. I feel like our industry is lacking boundaries and boundary work. I think oftentimes in this industry, we're just pushed to the limit and pushed and pushed and pushed. And, like the go, go, go you were all talking about, it's okay to take breaks. I mean, legally, it's okay to take breaks, but also as a human, it's okay to take breaks. And I feel like I grew up in an industry where that was not what was taught to me. And so boundary work around breaks, around who I spend time with or how much time I spend with them is super important. I think we underestimate sometimes the influence that our circle has, our community has. So making sure that, you surround yourself with the right kind of energy. And another one I wanted to mention was naming and claiming. So I think oftentimes we don't name things. And so it gets confusing and we get confused between like what we're feeling. And I think when you start to name it, you can manage it. When you understand a problem, then you can find solutions. But I think if there's not like proper, words and a specific description to what you're feeling, then it can be really hard to work through it, and when you mentioned Hardette about stigma, I mean, that is such a big one, and naming that, like, oh my gosh, this is stigma. Like what I'm feeling right now is stigma. And then you can work your way through it. And I mean, Kris, I gotta get one of those hoodies. I love it so much.
Yeah.
I have to buy one of those. That would be a Christmas present to myself. Because it's just like we stigmatize ourselves, and I think sometimes in the workplace it shows up a lot. But it's not called that, it's kind of hidden or it's like normalized. But no, we have to call it out. That's stigma. The fact that I can't tell my manager that I have depression, that's stigma. The fact that, maybe I'm being asked to do something against, my own mental health boundaries, then that needs to be discussed and named, I think. So yeah, I wanted to add those coping tips. We do have a really great question that someone sent in. So I'm going to read it, and if all of you could talk to it, or if anyone wants to jump in and answer it, please do, and then I want to add something at the end. So it sounds like we're speaking to the end of hierarchical structure in hospitality. Do we have another model to look to? Is there an industry North America or abroad, where emotional intelligence leadership, less of the boss, chef, owner knows all, and is the source of all things, and more, we are all in this together. Where does that exist, or are we really inventing it from scratch? I love this question so much. I just think it's so brilliant. Melinda Dorn, thank you. So who wants to go first?
I don't mind jumping in on this one because it's I don't have the answer. So like big spoiler alert, you got to the back page, no one knows. But I think you've hit the nail on the head. The Escoffier system, certainly within brigades, it was a military-based system. It was brought in and it works. You know, it works in order to be able to get 7 different dishes out all at the same time. It works. But where it doesn't work, and what was never expected of it, was the impact that it has on the well-being of the people within that hierarchy system. It's no different, and you know, excuse me if anyone has been to war or has been on tour, but you know, you're working to a military system in a very strict hierarchical structure, whereby if you're at the bottom of that structure, it's going to be pretty awful for you, whether you like it or not. Working in environments that are incredibly stressful and physically demanding, and also demanding on your well-being as well, and that needs to change. I think from me personally, where I see it going is first off, we need to upskill the managers. You know, the amount of chefs, I mean, Billy, you've been an exec chef for a long period of time, and Ariel, I know you have as well. You learn things over a long period of time, but we're finding now more and more head chefs, general managers are getting in the jobs at 20, 21, 22 years old because the sous chef left or the CDP has left, and all of a sudden everyone's getting bumped up the chain. No one ever gets taught management techniques. They don't get taught interpersonal skills. They've learned from the 45, 50-year-old old school chef beforehand. They've gone, right, screaming and shouting and ruling by fear is the way that this needs to be done, so I'm just going to run with that. And I think where we start to see, I mean, in a world where everything was perfect, you would perhaps have more of the role situations. You would skill people based on their ability. You would have everyone at the same level, but having different roles. And it would be your job as a manager to upskill those individuals so that they're more resilient within those roles, to allow them the coping mechanisms to cope better with stress and with those busy periods, by making sure that you as an individual are there to protect them, not to make their lives harder. And I think that's perhaps where, I mean, I come from a white collar background. You know, I worked in offices and large corporates, so I understand the benefits of one-to-ones. And, you know, I would never dream of, you know, unplugging someone's laptop and throwing it down the stairs to teach them a lesson, because that's just not what goes on. And I think that we perhaps need to spend a little bit more time looking at other industries and looking at what is normal practice within those industries and seeing how we can adopt it into a hospitality environment.
I love that, Kris. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. You summed it up so well. I really want to echo that, you know, a bit of a shift in focus is really about understanding that there's several different jobs and roles within the kitchen, one not more important than the other. And I think that all are needed to succeed. And I think there needs to be a shift in focus into more emphasis on psychological safety in the workplace. You know, I think we need to have the innovation and creations of the people coming in, even if they're at entry level. You know, we want that raw talent. We want that raw, unfiltered ideas. And I think that you're absolutely right. We need to start looking to other industries and what other industries have been able to implement in order to, you know, stimulate and grow their cultures, and studies that have been done within other industries. I think for too long, there hasn't been enough, you know, emphasis on the person and the individual within our workforce.
100%, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I think everything that both of you said was amazing, and I think there's something a little bit flawed with our industry in a self of I'm biased from the chef side with it, but if you ever had somebody ask you like or call you chef outside of work, and then you're like, And I've had this debate through life about like, chef is something I choose to do, but like Billy is who I am. And when those merge to a level of not being able to understand those differences, that's where the ego starts to creep in. That's where me thinking that I deserve separate rules, or that I'm above certain things, or that, as Kris mentioned earlier, that like I did an 18-hour day, you're complaining about a 12-hour day. Like, and that's where those things creep in. But we forget that sometimes that like we're people. I'm a huge sports fan, and sports, there's always a GM, there's always a coach, there's always somebody that can screw it up. There's always somebody that will be held responsible even if they're not, and there's always somebody that has the ability to take their position because of power or take their position because of leadership. To what Kris said, we need more leaders. We need more people who realize you're responsible for the people who look up to you. You're responsible for the people who choose to work for you and with you. It's not that people are exchangeable and can just be kicked out and replaced. It's they chose you. So you choose them. You protect them. You take care of them. And in this industry, it kind of is the opposite, but we are a huge dividing force. I've been doing this since I was a kid. The millennial force right now is the most powerful force in the entire world. And all it takes for us to stop this is stop doing what the generation before us did. And if enough people stand up and speak this, there's no one person that's powerful enough to replace you all. So it's about standing up, making this the normal, making this what everybody speaks about, and make the powerful the minority, make the leaders who we follow. And if you're striving to be a leader, you'll have more people follow you, and that's how we break the cycle. But that's my sporting background. How you do it in real world is, I don't know, like focus really hard on being a good person who cares for other people.
Could I just
I
jump
agree
in?
with that.
So I was just going to say.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Hardette, I do apologize, but like you say, you don't know how to do that. Just start with, like, if you're feeling mentally unwell and you're the leader of that team, take a day off. Lead by it through demonstration. Sorry,
Yeah,
Hardette,
role
I do
modeling.
apologize.
Okay.
Hardette, your turn before we wrap up. Hardette, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, at the end, when what to do, one of the things I try to do, and I'm sure we all do, but I think it's really important, is to ask them their opinion. What do you think? What do you think? You know, how do you think? How does this taste? Do you think in any area? It doesn't have to be about the food. Just let them know. And I don't do it just to be doing it. I am seriously wanting them to be part of this, so they don't think that even though the buck stops with me, I want it to taste a certain way. I want this to run a certain way, but I do really care about what you think. And I think that over time lets them know that I care about you. You're important. You are part of this. I'm not just throwing out orders and instructions and saying, do this, do this, do this, and let me come in here and see, let me taste it, see if it's okay. It's not okay. Do this, do this, do this, and then you go home. No, you're part of this. And I think you get, in the long term, really good results from that. And not a lot of hurt feelings.
That is the best. I love that so much. Oh, last screen. We're ending off. I love the question so much. The only thing I wanted to add was homework. Homework for anyone watching. If you've never read Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, it is a leadership book that I think the whole entire hospitality industry needs. It talks about all of these things that everyone's talked about. So thank you everyone for joining us. It is 3 o'clock, you know, in a couple seconds. So I just wanted to close us out. Thank you, Billy, Hardette, you know, Ariel, Kris, for, you know, all of everything you shared and being vulnerable today. And no, we don't have all the answers, but I think the important thing is that we are willing to admit that our previous generation didn't. Our previous generation tried to convince us that they had all the answers when they didn't. And a lot of us, you know, have suffered for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I will just echo that, saying thank you again. And this recording will be on Open for Good, so check that out. Thank you again.
And thank you to Dean Spears for hosting.